What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Check the Kick. Sherdog.com is the website. I'm the host, Evan. I have two special guests with me today. It's going to be the final show of 2024. Bomb-ass year. Not as many knockouts as we expected. Those stupid gloves. But Ben, Dayne, how are you guys doing? Thank you for joining me.
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me. It feels good to kind of wrap up the year talking about a few things that we've been talking about over the last month or so. You know, what's the biggest, best this or that of the year, but always good to come and get the perspective from two such bright gentlemen as yourselves.
Yeah, doing well myself. Always love year-end type of shows because you get to debate things that don't necessarily have a wrong answer, unless you're just pulling answers way out of your ass or something like that. Because we could all have varied answers on this, and none of us are necessarily wrong. But it's always fun to debate these types of things.
I like year-end shows. Number one, we're all probably fiending for some MMA, and during the year we're bitching and moaning, these stupid Apex cards, shaking our fist at the screen, and then here I am jonesing. So I'm here to talk about MMA. I miss MMA. There's a Ryzen show soon, but not even a ton going on with that. Through the show, we will talk about awards. We will talk about one special award that I actually have not heard any other end of the year shows talk about. So that's important to me. And then we're going to look ahead into 2025 on what champs will remain champion, what champs will lose their belts, what's going to kind of happen with the divisions, men and women. We will first start off with Fighter of the Year. I think all three of us agree, but there is an argument for a couple dudes. Ben, your Fighter of the Year and why?
My Fighter of the Year is Ilia Topuria, UFC Featherweight champ, and I was a little surprised. There was a decent amount of votes among the Sherdog staff panel for Alex Pereira. We put a poll on the front page of Sherdog, and Pereira won pretty handily. I don't think it's that close. I think Ilia Topuria had one of the best years by any fighter in recent memory. Like, to go back to a year when a single fighter had 2 pound-for-pound quality wins like Ilia Topuria did this year, I think you'd have to go back at least to, if not the Pride Fighting Championships Grand Prix days, at least like that last Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix. Like, I hold Ilia Topuria's 2 dominant knockout wins this year. I think it puts him a tier above anybody else's year, including Alex Pereira.
Dayne, who do you have?
I'm totally in agreement with Ben. I'm not going to take anything away from the year that Alex Pereira had. He probably is the Fighter of the Year. We'll say about 80% of the time, based on what he did do, because he defended his belt 3 times, and each time was relatively short notice. I think that's the main thing that voters on our webpage were able to grab, because he wins the belt in November 2023, defends it on a relatively quick turnaround in April, even quicker turnaround in June, and then another quick turnaround in October. In today's MMA world, where you're lucky to get 2 defenses in a year out of a champ, it is impressive. But Ilia was able to defeat the top 2 featherweights, at least for most people, the top 2 featherweights that have been in the division in its history. I know that Aldo's in the discussion, but both Volk and Holloway have wins over Aldo as well. So Ilia not only beating them, but beating them badly, knocking them, being the first to knock out Holloway and knocking out Volk the way that he did. It had to be Ilia for me. I don't want to say there's not a debate, but I didn't have to give it much thought before going with Ilia.
I'm actually going to go with Joaquin, but I'm kidding. It is Joaquin Buckley had a hell of a year, especially for a dude that was, for lack of better terms, meddling at middleweight. Dudes like Carlos Prates had an incredible year. Yeah, of course, Alex Pereira had an incredible year. He saved the UFC, but knocking out Jamal Hill, knocking out Yuri Prochazka and knocking out Khalil Roundtree, those are all really cool wins. They were all awesome fights. They were fucking blood and guts. You know, sword to sword type of fights. But what Topuria did to sword to sword sounds pretty funny. Sword versus sword. That still sounds bad. What Ilia Topuria was able to do to Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski, for me personally, are the number 1 and number 2 greatest featherweights of all time. I'm putting Jose Aldo at number 3 because Max Holloway finished him twice. You know, and what Topuria did to those dudes, they weren't close decisions. They were like violent finishes that were executed perfectly. You know, the way he finished Max Holloway, being the first dude to ever, you know, we all know Justin Gaethje dropped Max Holloway, but on record, they didn't count that as he had never been dropped up until the Ilia Topuria fight. Not only did he drop him, he knocked him dead. And the way he curled up Volk against the side of the octagon was, you know, it almost hurts him that Volk lost in a kind of similar fashion, getting head kicked by Islam up against the cage, really similar way he kind of crumbled over. But knocking those two dudes out back to back, that would be like Pereira knocking out DC and Glover, or even more, you know, in some, I can't think of. Volk and Holloway are like the two. I mean, in the UFC, I can't think of two better featherweights by a mile.
Well, Topuria wrecking Holloway the way he did reminded me of when Alex Pereira beat Israel Adesanya the first time, because Adesanya had never lost within his weight class in the UFC. Most of the guys he'd fought had barely laid a finger on him, like let alone hurt him badly, and then just got flatlined. That's kind of what it felt like. And sure enough, that year, Alex Pereira was my fighter of the year. He was everybody's fighter of the year.
It's so hard to take it. You can't take anything away from Alex either. I mean, he's fighting these fights, and I think something that's not being talked about is how he's going into these fights like hella injured, like he's all beat to shit too. But Topuria's class, his ability, the way he dismantled those two guys, I mean, there's like a Grand Canyon between him and Alex for me as fighter of the year.
Well, if we're being honest, there's a Grand Canyon in the level of skill in opposition between light heavyweight and featherweight as well. So,
yep.
You know, it's not just that he beat the two best featherweights. These guys have continually had to fight off the top combatants at featherweight. You know, Holloway has wins over Yair Rodriguez and Arnold Allen as well. Who are the best ones that Khalil Roundtree beat before he faced Pereira? His best win was what? Let's see.
Dustin Jacoby in a robbery.
Yeah, or Anthony Smith. I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
The guys that Ilia beat were far more proven as contenders than the guys that Alex was beating. And again, Alex had a phenomenal year. 75-80% of the time he's fighter of the year, but no, in my book, had to be Ilia.
Contenders versus legends.
Yep.
Legends in their prime.
Mm-hmm.
These are dudes. I mean, Volk, you could make an argument that he has been removed from his prime, but can't make that argument about Max. He just went, and I'm sure we'll be talking about him real soon. He went up there and dismantled Justin Gaethje in a weight class above, came down, and Ilia knocked him dead. Incredible. Like, one of the, I can't think of two better back-to-back wins, let alone them both happening this past year. Just incredible from Ilia. All right, moving on to fight of the year. This could be in any organization, and all of these, you know, awards could come from, you know, any organization, contender series, whatever you guys like. I'm going to go first for fight of the year, and it was on a pretty lackluster pay-per-view card, but these two dudes went to war. Fight of the year, I have Islam Makhachev defeating Dustin Poirier in their almost 5-round barn burner. That was it was a literally a technical barn burner. Like these dudes had a chest mask, but also just brawled it out. The way that Islam was able to finish Dustin in the 5th round with that incredible takedown and submission. Dustin Poirier had 1 round. He came back and started looking really good and kind of, landed more shots on Islam than really anyone else has. And Dustin just being the old dog and Islam being able to show that he is, as tough, durable, and skillful as ever. I just thought that was just an incredible chess match where these two dudes also went to war. Dane, fight of the year.
I don't feel like that there was any real fights that completely belonged to the ages this year. It's not like there were fights that sucked by means. I'm not saying it was a bad year for fights, but there wasn't one that just completely stood out. And so, like your picking Poirier and Makhachev was something that I considered. The other one that really raced through my head was Zellhuber and Ribovics, but I settled on Mateusz Rebecki and Mikdebek Orolbai, in part because entering that fight, looking at that card on UFC 308, that was probably the last fight that I expected to be anywhere in contention for fight of the night. Orolbai's a drag you to the mat and wrestle you to the wrestle you. I'm not going to say that. I'm trying to be better with my language. Anyway, and Rebecki, just kind of a punches and bunches type guy, a little bit of a motor, but he doesn't do anything flashy. But son of a bitch, if I'm shocked. I know I say I'm watching my language and then I do that. But if both of them just didn't go out on their shield, one of them should have, is how I feel. But some way, somehow, both of them made it to the bell. Just complete blood and guts, fantastic fight. And I will admit the fact that I never expected those two to produce something that was a fight of the year contender is kind of what pushed me over the edge. Give those guys some shine, because I find it hard to believe they're going to be anywhere near that ever again.
Then, fight of the year.
I also I gave some consideration to a fantastic fight that happened fairly recently outside the UFC in Lewis McGrillen Evans versus Dean Garnett over in PFL Europe. It was an absolute barn burner, extremely violent for a bantamweight fight. You had everything you'd want to see, back and forth, swings of momentum. But in the end, I gave it to Mateusz Rebecki and Mikdebek Orolbai by a nose as well. And what made the difference for me was the blood and guts aspect. Because if you had paused that after the first round was over, I would have put down good money that thing was not going to see the final horn. And I think Orolbai's disgusting eye socket hemorrhage is probably the nastiest injury in a fight that made it the distance since Zhang versus Jan Jacek back in 2020. What do you got?
I want to actually say, too bad we didn't cut this award out. Injury of the year, because Aldana's head was fucking bad this year too, man. And that fight went to the end too.
Yeah, that's another one. But there's a difference between my head is real swollen and I look like I'm about to birth a homunculus out of my eye socket.
I think I'm actually the one that put that into the yearly awards on the Sherdog Slack for Orolbai versus Rebecki. Another cool fact about that fight was Rebecki had just got his fucking ass kicked by your guy, Diego Ferreira, in his fight before that. So this was his return bout after getting his... Dude, how much damage did this dude take in back-to-back fights? Like, holy fuck.
He needs to go to the New Face store for sure. Like,
everyone's going to Turkey to get a hair transplant. He needs to get a face, and he needs to get like a nose transplant. Where can we get that from? Honestly, Zellhuber and Ribovics was also an incredible fight at Sphere, where Zellhuber looked like one of the parking lot things, kind of the used car lot air thingies that are like dancing. He's like up against the cage, or like a sunflower in a windstorm. He was like, he was looking out of it. The Orolbai should have died like 3 times in that fight. and then he like came back and like if he had like an extra minute in that 5th round,
Third.
who knows?
Yeah.
Or sorry, 3rd round.
That's definitely a fight though that it's going to take years off of their life. If not years, it's definitely going to take years off of their careers. Because, damn, like that's another reason I'm like give it to them, because I don't know how much more that they can give after a fight like that.
Just an incredibly. We've had good fights this year too. Like we're not going to talk about Dricus versus Adesanya. Like that was a pretty cool fight. Just a ton of back and forth brawls. I did personally enjoy Islam versus Dustin, but I mean Oralbai and Rebecca, those dudes literally were like both inches from death. Moving on to probably my favorite award that we're going to give out, knockout of the year. Some really, really cool knockouts this year. A lot of, jump knees. We saw Sopai get face planted by Vinicius Oliveira. Just a ton of really, really cool stuff. Dayne, knockout of the year. I think we're all unanimous on this, but I'm gonna let you go first.
Yeah, no, there is no other choice. It has to be Holloway, putting it all on the line in the final seconds of his 5-round battle with Justin Gaethje, and paying off in the ultimate way by, he doesn't just knock out Gaethje, he face plants him. And Gaethje has been the indestructible man who can walk through anything throughout his MMA career. And, people have more or less had an outlook of Holloway as being pillow fisted. The punches and bunches is the way that he gets you, wears you down over a fight. And it was a one-hitter quitter that put Gaethje down for the count, to the point where we haven't seen Gaethje since, and he's a guy who likes to stay kind of busy because, this isn't just the way that he makes his living. He thinks this type of blood and guts fight is fun, and he has not been back since then. He still doesn't have a fight scheduled, which means it's probably going to be over a year that he steps into a cage after that. So, yeah, no, there's only one choice in my mind: Holloway KOing Gaethje in the literal last second of their epic at UFC 300.
Ben, tell me why it's Max Holloway.
Well, for all the reasons Dayne mentioned, it is Max Holloway's knockout of Justin Gaethje. It was just one more legendary moment in a legendary career. It was a Hollywood ending. It was a storybook thing. Having said all that, like, I'm gonna rain on the parade a little bit. Now, the one thing I'll say is it was dramatic enough a knockout that I think it makes us remember the fight more fondly. Because as my usual podcast co-host Keith Schillen points out, aside from that, we were on the way to kind of a fun but one-sided win for Holloway. Like Gaethje had a couple of moments, and aside from that, Holloway just Hollowayed him. He was outlanding him 2-1, making him look a step behind the whole time, and kind of starting to roll down on hill on him. Like, Holloway did almost the only thing he could with 10 seconds left to make the fight more memorable. Other than that, it was a deluxe version of the same thing he did to so many of his challengers at featherweight. The fight, nearly meaningless. I mean, incredibly entertaining, but nearly meaningless. If Holloway stays at 155, it has a little bit of meaning because it gives the UFC an idea of kind of where to slot him in at the top 10. How far is he from the title picture? If he decided he was going to stay at 145 after this, it's literally meaningless. It's an exhibition between two fan favorite fighters. Having said all that, what else could be the choice in this year? Like, it was the moment that had probably the most fans jumping out of their seats wherever they were and screaming.
I'm surprised my neighbor, and I don't live in an apartment I live in a house. And there's another house and yard, but I'm surprised my neighbor didn't call the cops because I probably screamed so loud. There's been a couple moments in my combat sports fandom where I have screamed really loud, and that was one of them. people do forget how like he almost finished Gaethje up against the cage like 2 minutes prior to that in a one of those flurries similar to his Calvin Kattar fight, where like how did Calvin Kattar not die either? He ruined Calvin Kattar is what Max Holloway did. But he had hurt Gaethje multiple times in that fight. It was like the best Max has ever looked. And to just go the way he went to the body and then just came up over the top. Justin Gaethje did the rolling thunder 3 seconds before that, and he met him in the pocket where he did not need to do that. It's kind of like they were running in a race, and the guy that was ahead stopped, waited for him to catch up, and then still dusted him at the, still kind of sprinted at the end and beat him at the sprint. It was really, really cool. And Max just showed his class in that moment, and really set the table for that Ilia Topuria fight.
It did.
But incredible from Max. And he's got that moment, UFC 300. That's just like stamped in history for forever. And that's something I know all three of us will remember probably for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, no, I said I don't know if there was a fight for the ages necessarily this year, but that was 100% a knockout for the ages. That one is something anybody who is watching it is going to remember.
One thing that the only other knockout, and I almost, if Max Holloway's fight did not exist, if any of you guys were up as late as I was watching UFC Macau and watching Shi Ming, literally, I made a joke in the Sherdog Slack, like, hey, did we finally see it happen? And then like 3 minutes later, I actually went back and deleted that because I was like, I don't want to wish this into existence. I was concerned for Shi Ming's opponent. That was like the most concerned I've been watching a fight in a real long time. And I watched Jamal Hill get his arm broken in a fight and elbowed like a million times. I was really concerned. And I mean, the knockout from Shi Ming, UFC Macau at like 3 a.m. Pacific time was pretty fucking cool too.
No, that was great, but I think what made it even scarier though is the UFC broadcast team talking about, oh yeah, well the hospital is only 20 minutes away. 20 minutes away. 20 minutes. That's a long time.
She was unconscious for half of them.
No, exactly. They only got away with that because they were in Macau. You don't get away with that bullshit in North America.
Do you guys remember seeing a stretcher in MMA like since maybe old Japanese MMA like 15 years ago, 20 years ago? Like when was the last time you've
stretchers are usually for like the leg injuries with like Weidman or when Connor broke his leg. For somebody not moving because they're out cold like that, I really can't remember the last time. I'm not saying I haven't seen it before, but yeah.
Now I'm thinking about it.
I can't recall like that. Yeah, like you said, people blow their knees up. That if you're Herbert Burns, your brother will carry you out. But like from a blow to the head, I had not. I thought we might have first got our first, in MMA, and that kind of I was frightened in that moment. So Shi Ming, I think your parents know that you're a fighter now, and you get my number 2.
Hey, did they stretcher out Terry Edom after Barboza stiffed him?
No,
should have.
No.
Okay, I can't remember. I remember he was out for a while and he was stiff as a board. So okay, I can't remember.
Gilbert Burns carried him out. That's the rumor.
It was in Brazil.
But he was so stiff, he had to like turn him this way to like get him through the cage door. Yeah.
Gilbert should just make a career of that, like giving piggyback rides from,
It doesn't help that Herbert is like 4 inches taller than Gilbert. It just made it look even more ridiculous.
Yes. It's just like, your drunk friend that you got to carry home. It's kind of looked like one of those things like you're big, but I love you, buddy. All right. Submission of the year. We didn't have too many to choose from this year, in my opinion. We had one that was pretty violent. I think we're all in agreement here. I'm gonna go first. Submission of the year for me, Khamzat Chimaev kind of tech subbed and actually subbed Whitaker at the same time. Because if Whitaker wouldn't have tapped that was also kind of one of the first times I've seen like a strength submission like that in that position, like actually break things, especially on a human face. The way that it was a neck crank, face crank. That face crank he hit on Robert Whitaker nearly made him ingest his own teeth. Ben, submission of the year for you. Who do you have?
I tried to justify awarding it anywhere else. It says a lot that Stevie Ray now gets so many twisters that it like doesn't even ping our radar anymore. He just twisted another dude over in PFL. Like, watch your spines out there. But yeah, it's got to be Chimaev versus Whitaker. And there's nothing about elegant technique to it. It was a panic, brute force submission. But one, it was a super important fight. When it matters more to us. And we just hadn't seen anyone run game on Whitaker like that on the ground before. Yeah, just nasty stuff. He wrapped it up so fast, and then just that python squeeze, absolutely terrifying. And yeah, if Whitaker had an extra split second, if Chimaev hadn't been so fast to slap it on, he probably gets his chin at least into the crease and he can fight it off for a few minutes. We get the token 5 seconds of hand fighting, but no, it is something that if it had been under the chin would have been a bar arm choke, like the forearm is perpendicular to the windpipe. And when you get one of those, you're tapping out from pain, not because you can't breathe. Now imagine on your fucking teeth. Break my arm any day of the week before you do that to my teeth. Probably be cheaper to fix too.
Dane, do you agree with us? Do you have your own? Are you on an island?
Not in this case. No, I'm in complete agreement. There's so much. There's a theatrical element to it. Like I remember watching it and just thinking, "Wow, that was quick," and then you watch the replay and you understand exactly what it is that happened. Now, there's a couple of things in here that make it that much more special. We know that Whitaker is one tough SOB. Remember, he was able to beat Yoel Romero after blowing out his knee just mere seconds into their first contest. That's a hell of a feat. That's an indication that this guy is made of something else. And as soon as Khamzat slapped that on him, he's tapping. And beyond that, you could say, well, okay, if Whitaker's teeth were that bad, anybody could have done that. Okay, why didn't somebody do it before? Nobody else had. He admitted that his teeth had been bad for a while. Well, okay, somebody else should have been able to do that if they were that bad, but nobody did. It was Khamzat and Khamzat alone. And the other thing that people need to keep in mind, this is at middleweight. You might expect something like that out of heavyweight, where you've got these big burly guys. The fact that Khamzat used to be able to cut down to 170. I don't think he probably could now, but regardless, that's an incredible feat. The first time we see somebody cave in somebody's mouth, it's not a heavyweight, it's a middleweight. That is a scary, scary thought for his opponents.
Yes.
The way he the very untechnical term would be like he just went out there and mobbed on Robert Whitaker, and we haven't seen anyone do that. Like no one has gone out there, got shot. Khamzat's athletic ability, his strength, his speed, like not often do you get both. But his ability to just get that takedown, that low takedown on Robert Whitaker and just completely manhandle him on the ground, shut down everything. Robert Whitaker can scramble his ass off. We all know that. And he had no moments. He's wrestled Olympians. He's had fights with Jacare. It's just what Khamzat did was incredible. Also, too, keep in mind that Whitaker was coming off of that incredible knockout win over Ikram Alaskirov, who was Hamzat's toughest opponent, up until that point. And what Hamzat did was he just put that shit to bed real quick. Special shout out though, which I don't hear this getting talked about enough. Kevin Holland did break Michelle Olazechuk's arm real fucking bad. Like, was it back in June or July? Do you guys remember that? Like that thing snapped. It was June 1st in round 1, like got clubbed and then immediately got that really dope arm bar.
If I remember, Oleksiejczuk still wanted to keep fighting too.
He
that was a text sub. Like that I'm sure there's enough mics in there where like I'm sure one of them picked up the snap and I don't want to hear that.
I don't know if I've told either of you guys this one, but if I may take a minute or two.
Please.
I was covering UFC I think it was 262 live, the one where Jacare got his arm broken by Andre Muniz.
Oh, yeah, Muniz, yeah.
And so I'm on press row at the Toyota Center, and it's jam-packed. This card has Charles Oliveira on it. The card's a banger. The place is packed. The place is deafening. Everyone on press row could hear it clear as a bell when that arm broke. It sounded like somebody, it sounded like Nolan King, like 2 seats down from me, like broke a pencil or something. As they cut away to the desk and Annex talking about it and Rogan's losing his shit, the Jumbotrons replay it like 15 times to the point where I'm a jaded dude and I just look down at my shoes. I was just like, dude, tell me when they stop.
You talking about it makes me want to do the like hand in the ears or la 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 la, like I just a block, like the block. I have a Twitter account. So you guys know the type of videos that are out there on Twitter. Like I've seen people blow up. I would rather watch a faulty hand grenade go off than watch like one of those limb breaks like those kill me. To hear it and to know what it is makes my stomach churn. And that's, I mean, it's kind of what we got from Kevin Holland there. You could watch it break.
Yeah.
So I felt like that needed an honorable mention.
Yeah, no, there's that morbid human side in us that, we got to see it one time at least, but after that, we're just like, okay, I'm good. I'm done.
Playing it on the Jumbotron over and over again is like, gosh, what's the movie? They force their eyes open. Like, you gotta see this shit.
Clockwork Orange.
Clockwork Orange.
It's like you gotta, now you must see this.
Yeah, that's one of those movies that after you see it once, you don't have to ever see it again either.
Oh. All right. Next award, Beatdown of the Year. This is a term I use pretty loosely, but a shit kicking. We've had quite a few of those this year. I'm going to throw it to Dayne. Your Beatdown of the Year. Tell me the fight and explain why, please.
As far as I could tell, this one was something that a lot of us agreed on the Sherdog Slack as well. Anthony Hernandez and Michelle Pajeda. Most of us expected that to be competitive for about one round, and then Hernandez would slowly be able to start turning things around and maybe get a stoppage in about the third or fourth round. But no, it dragged out until the fifth round. I mean drag, just because it was maybe competitive for 30 seconds or so. Like the first round had it did not last long as far as the competitive nature. Hernandez just quickly suffocated Pajeda, smothered him. He was like a wet blanket, and Pajeda, to his credit, he didn't quit. There's a reason why it dragged out as long as he did, because he was following the referee's instructions, doing what he needed to do to keep the fight from being stopped. But it was one of the worst watches of the year, just because by the second round, you knew that Pereira didn't have anything in him to be able to reverse his fortunes. It was just going to be the same as long as the referee allowed it to continue, and the referee allowed it to continue into the 5th round. And it was a bad enough beatdown that I question whether or not Pereira will be Pereira going forward. I hope he is, just because he's one of those rare mythical creatures that's just a blast to watch when he's on doing his thing. But that was one of those beatdowns that was bad enough that it could, it very well likely altered his career.
Then,
have we disagreed on any categories yet?
I don't think me and you have, because we agreed on the fight of the year, but Dev was different from us on that.
Right. Okay. For me, it is Anthony Hernandez versus Michel Pereira as well. And for all the reasons Dayne mentioned, because we didn't even get the dynamic we thought we were going to get, because this was close to a pick'em. Hernandez was a slight favorite. He was like -120, -130, because everybody recognized, okay, for at least 8 to 10 minutes, Pereira could just pull off a helicopter kick, knock Hernandez's block off, and either end the fight there or do enough damage that we're in suspense to see whether Fluffy can get it back. But that wasn't the case. Hernandez was on him from the jump. He was much more aggressive than usual. And while Pereira really has shown better cardio than you would expect from a guy who fights at that pace and is built like he is, once they came out for the 3rd round and you could tell that Pereira was tired, for me, all of my beatdowns of the year, it's always one where it's not enjoyable by the end. And sometimes people are pointing the finger afterwards. Should it have been stopped? Should it have been the ref? Should it have been the corner? This was one of those. Just what an absolute savage beatdown. And this means something going forward, because much like Bilal Muhammad and Murad Dvalishvili before him, I think we just learned that as good as he's been, Anthony Hernandez was built for 5-round fights all along. He is going to be a scary, scary dude going forward.
I love the choice. I want to just pull up the Derek Cleary scorecard from that fight, because the fight was stopped in the 5th round, mercifully. Derek Cleary's scorecard for that fight. The first round, he scored for Michel Pereira 10-9. And then the rest of the rounds, 2 through 4, he gave Anthony Hernandez a 10-8 round. Ron McCarthy gave a 10-8 round to Anthony Hernandez in the 2nd round, but scored every round for him. And Ben Cartledge had every round scored for Anthony Hernandez, and the 3rd round at 10-8. So that scorecard kind of tells you where that fight was at. I actually disagree with you guys on this one. I really don't. That was a absolute drubbing. But I'm actually going with Moicano's violent finish over Benoit Saint Denis. That corner stoppage or whatever it was, after the 2nd round, that was really violent. A lot of really bad ground and pound. And poor BSD has taken so much, whatever is the opposite of fighter of the year is what BSD got this year, unfortunately.
Interesting piece of trivia, because this is, of course, the 2nd time that Benoit Saint-Denis has been on the wrong end of arguably the beatdown of the year. His UFC debut was an absolute beatdown of the year. And then his most recent outing against Moicano. Also on the short list this year for beatdown of the year was Priscilla Cachoeira, who got absolutely steamrolled by Jasmine Jasudavicius. Priscilla Cachoeira debuted in the UFC getting a beatdown of the year from Valentina Shevchenko. So we had 2 people this year that arguably could have won their 2nd beatdown of the year received.
Yeah, Cachoeira did get bludgeoned real bad by Jasmine Jasudavicius too. Jasudavicius, however you say your last name. That one was an absolute drubbing. I guess that wasn't this year. I'm thinking of DDP and Whitaker, but that was the year before. A ton of violence this year, especially now that the UFC's got rid of the new old new gloves.
If they've really gotten rid of them, I mean, we'll see.
What if they never changed them at all and they just told everyone they did?
Weren't they talking about continuing to use the new gloves on fight nights and just go back to the old ones for pay-per-views?
I heard that was just through the end of the year. So,
okay,
maybe they had enough time to get it manufactured for the new year, because 4 weeks, in between. We hope so.
I mean, if they have a backup Ian Gary fight kit for him to change in the middle of a fight, they've got to have a shit ton of gloves around. Do you guys remember that? The Ian Gary Shavkat? That was a weird moment. I've never seen a lot of things I'd never seen in combat sports in 2024. Beatdown of the year, though, I'm giving it to Renato Moicano, but Anthony Hernandez too. I mean,
I'll throw out one more honorable mention with that. Jones and Stipe. Given all the hype that was up with that one, that was about as one-sided as it gets. Jones and Stipe.
Yeah.
We've heard the term wolf tickets.
That's ironic, with a Diaz one saying that, and how many times have they tried to get him onto a show at this point?
Hey, you know what? Shout out to Themba Garimbo.
Donald Cerrone's coming back at middleweight. We might get Cerrone versus the other Diaz. Yeah.
The UFC's drug testing situation right now is really funny because Khalil Roundtree, what was it, 6 months ago, was like, yeah, my supplements were tainted. I'm just going to come out and confess. And then he gets a title fight. Donald Cerrone.
So wait a minute. Are you saying that Mirzakhanov is getting the next title fight against Pereira?
Honestly, if not for this, he might have.
He still might. Ankalaev may just get injured. He very well, and we'll talk about that. Actually, that's going to be a potential talking point for us. Beatdown of the year. This is our final award. We're going to go upset of the year. Some pretty big underdogs pulled some rabbits out of their hat. I mean, Max Holloway was a pretty hefty underdog against Justin Gaethje, even going into that fight. We talked about, fight of the year, and Rebecca was a pretty big underdog actually against Oralbai as well. But I'm going to go with, and I'm going to go first. I'm going to go with Gabby Fernandez, kind of club and subbing Wang Kong when Wang Kong thought she was going to be Alex Pereira 2.0. And it's not just the betting odds. It's not just the way the fight was finished. Wang Kong will probably be a changed fighter after that loss. The way she showed up to fight week with the face paint, the way that she was carrying herself. UFC Macau was that show was kind of put around her. And Mr. Fernandez, caught her with the head kick and then caught her with the boxing and then squeezed her head off. And I should have pulled the odds for that, but I'm not that professional, but maybe one of you guys know it.
Wang minus 1,300, Fernandez plus 750.
So that's my upset of the year. Ben, I think you're going to piggyback me. I think you're riding my coattails here.
I absolutely am. For me, it's Fernandez versus Wang. One, you've got the strict statistical fireworks. It's one of the, at worst, 5 biggest upsets in UFC history, just in terms of the straight betting line. Then number 2, yeah, there's the optics of it. The entire UFC Macau card was really set up to put Chinese fighters over, and probably none more so than Kong Wang. She was, while she's not young, she's 32, but undefeated, young in the sport. Most importantly, there in China, a Wushu Sanda world champ. I can't overstate how important that is in China. Chinese regional MMA up until 2016 consisted of promotions bringing in cans to lose to Wushu Sanda fighters, because the whole point was to just prove that Kung Fu was the best. It wasn't necessarily to prove that fighter A was the best fighter. It's just UFC 1 repeated on a monthly basis. All of this, and it was brilliant matchmaking. Fernandez was not just a huge underdog, but stylistically even a worse matchup than you would think like it would be just on paper. She is a sloppy brawler that can't dictate range. That's someone that Wang should have just been able to surgically dissect. And so it's not just that she gets tapped out, because if she was going to lose, that's probably how it was going to happen. But she got clean head kicked first. Like she was getting rib roasted. Yeah. She totally collapsed. Fernandez was on the spot with the win. Great upset. Much more exciting than that fight had any right to be.
Dane, are you in agreement?
Unanimous, easily. Yeah. I can't put it any better than what Ben did. All I can really do is find a couple other little nuggets to add to it. For instance, Fernandez saved her UFC employment in the fight before by fighting Carly Judish to a split decision. Now, I don't want to crap on Judish. I think that she has some talent and potential, but that was Judish's 5th professional fight, not her 5th UFC fight. That was her 5th professional fight.
She's the best women's flyweight in Louisiana.
And really?
Yeah.
But it's either her or Victoria Leonardo.
Judish.
And that was a robbery too, man. Like Judice had a real big, I'm not gonna call it a robbery. Like Judice had a real good argument for that win. And then I think the most important thing that we didn't speak on yet was the fact that Wang Kong has a real shoddy, real shady win over Valentina Shevchenko. When Shevchenko was like you said, a multiple world Muay Thai champion at that time, and they brought her into China to just kind of have this fight with I think it's Wang Tong. Yeah, I don't know. And beat Valentina Shevchenko in a kickboxing Muay Thai bout where like she really didn't. If you actually go watch the fight back, it was like a bad robbery. But that was her, Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira thing that she was. I mean, she was holding on to that ticket, and Gabby Fernandez took that ticket and fucking ripped it in half. She was so shredded too. Gabby Fernandez, like, do you guys remember how shredded she was in that fight?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. She was looking very intimidatingly chiseled. Yes.
No, she knew damn well why she was there. She knew, and she fought like she knew why she was there because she felt completely disrespected. So, credit to her, for having her back up against the wall. She knew that she was brought in there to flew halfway around the world. It wasn't just flying up from Brazil to North America, which is still a hell of a flight. This was all the way to China, and she, yeah. And so she, you're talking about her ripping up Kong Wang's ticket. She turned in her ticket with that one. She's going to have that be the first thing that John Anik mentions about her every single time for as long as she's on the UFC roster.
Another one fighter was kind of victim to this for 2 of his fights this year, where he was a big favorite and he lost, and you could even Anthony Smith over Vitor Petrino. That jumping Gilly, he was a big underdog there, and I think Jacoby was also.
Oh, well, I was going to say really quick with Smith's win over Petrino, that's looking like an even bigger upset with time because Smith just looks worse and worse with each passing fight. That loss to Reyes was ugly, sad, dude.
And much like Smith beating Petrino and just kind of having the old guy having one last gasp in him. Very similarly, Neil Magny ruining Canada for Mike Malott.
Oh yeah,
where Malott was a -700 favorite, and Magny was like, "Have any of you guys watched my fight with Hector Lombard?" So that was another one where Magny's clearly on the downslope, not as far as Smith, but that doesn't mean. That doesn't mean he can't still take down a borderline top 10 guy from time to time.
I love that our upsets of the year too are not like, ooh, this person was a big underdog and eked out a decision. No, like underdogs bit and like bodies hit the deck.
Yep.
People got murked, and in pretty interesting fashion. And Wang Kong, the way she went out, like she got kicked in the head, hurt again in the boxing, and then like choked all the way out. Neil Magny bludgeoned Mike Malott real bad in the final round of their fight. Just kind of, even Anthony Smith, the way he jumped that guillotine. And then I know Jacoby was a pretty big dog too against Petrino, I believe, and like he just stiffened him in a arguable knockout of the year as well.
Yep. And Jacoby is a guy that I had been kind of starting to write off, that like maybe the good times were done, and he came out and surprised me.
Yeah, he'd lost 4 of his last 5 going into that fight, something like that. I'll admit one of them was a robbery. I don't think that Khalil Roundtree beat him. We already mentioned that earlier in the show, but regardless, Jacoby was on a downward spiral, and holy crap, did he pull himself out of that?
So that is the Check the Kick / Sherdog / Ben and Dayne's awards of the year. There's more to talk about. Go to Sherdog.com. All of our stuff is on there, with who we voted for, and all of the Sherdog panel is in there. Plenty of cool award stuff. We're going to give one final award. I guess it'll be more of a participation trophy. But I haven't heard anyone talk about this. We're going to say goodbye to a fighter that retired in 2024. Some big names retired. Some people got some amazing retirement packages. Some didn't. Some got played in China a week later at a weird time. We're going to say goodbye to a fighter that retired in 2024. Dayne, I'm going to let you go first.
I'll start. And me and you kind of talked about this a little beforehand with the show. And we both had 2 fighters in mind. I'll go with the one that I think is actually done, because we know that MMA retirements are a very tenuous thing. We just barely got word that no, actually Damon Jackson is not retired. He's going to keep fighting. We've got Cowboy Cerrone, who's back in the pool, but given that he already spent, what was it, 3.5 years on the sideline, I think Stipe actually is done. It's a retirement that didn't get a lot of hoopla. Like you said, the bye-bye video that they presented to him, they didn't have one ready for him immediately. So that didn't get played until like 3 a.m. for UFC Macau, which is kind of sad because
when that rolled.
It's kind of sad, like Stipe's one of those guys who never really got the respect he deserved from the fans. You had a lot of the talking heads proclaim him as the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time, which he very well could be. If I'm going to talk about all-time great heavyweights, I'd probably put Fedor ahead of him, but given that there's still a lot of people who consider Fedor to be the GOAT, that's not like I'm paying any disrespect to Stipe. He had an underrated trilogy with Daniel Cormier in which he ended up on top. People forget that he's the one who taught Francis Ngannou what high-level MMA is all about, that there's levels to this thing. And while Francis has discovered that himself and become and worked up to the next level, it was Stipe who taught him that lesson. And we think about when Stipe won the title. I remember him immediately jumping over the cage and, I'm world champion. I'm world champion. It was just surreal for him because, working class guy, the UFC talked nonstop how he's still a firefighter, but, he really exemplified, a dream come true right at that moment. Just, I'm world champion. You could see how it was dawning on him at that point. There was zero cockiness involved in it. It was just like, oh, son of a bitch, I actually did it. So happy trails to Stipe. I don't know. He'll probably continue to be a firefighter. He seems to enjoy that, but much appreciation for the blood, sweat, and tears, and breaks. I think that's always important to add in with MMA fighters that he put in for mine and millions of others' entertainment.
What is your favorite Stipe moment? Either one of you guys, both of you guys.
I think his knockout of Verdum when he won the belt.
Sake, Dayne, that's what I was going to say.
That's because we're all smart.
Well,
it's mine too. You know.
I mean, dude, he's moving backward and just face plants Verdum. So that's one of the more underrated knockouts of all time, if you ask me.
It's totally, or just coming to the conclusion like I should just punch DC in the belly. And hand fighting, and then whip into the body with a
hit him like King Hippo.
It's like, ooh, like it's like he found the cheat code in the DC fight. The DC trilogy was really fucking awesome. A lot of people didn't love Stipe. I loved Stipe coming up. Probably the biggest sports bet I've ever won. I don't sports bet anymore, but in my sports betting past was when Stipe defeated Francis Ngannou the first time. I won a pretty fat chunk of change on that bout. So Stipe helped me get some money. And then my second biggest MMA win was actually when Francis Ngannou beat Cyril Gane. So Francis has been part of two of my biggest winning tickets. Stipe was such an awesome career. It was so funny when they talked to Stipe. He did an interview somewhere after he retired, and he was like, "Yeah, it's just obvious. Like I thought you guys all knew that already. After the John Jones fight, he was just kind of like, yeah, duh. I thought we just all came to that agreement that I was retiring." The way Stipe Miocic's retirement is the most Stipe Miocic retirement. Ben, what fighter in 2024 retired that you want to, give a handshake to, pat on the back, maybe a hug, and wish them happy trails?
So just a little over 20 years ago, December 8th, 2004, Dimebag Darrell Abbott, most famous, of course, as the guitarist from Pantera, was shot and killed on stage with his then band Damage Plan in Columbus, Ohio. Matt Brown was there, and he's been angry ever since. Matt actually has not fought since last May, but it wasn't until this year that he announced his retirement, almost a year to the day after his last fight. At this point, I am more inclined to believe him. He's, moved into coaching. It is, now a year and a half removed from his last fight. Obviously not a Stipe Miocic level figure, in the all-time annals of MMA, but one of the people that, if we are doing our job as media members, will not be forgotten by casual fans 5, 10, 20 years from now. You think of people in the UFC right now, like Michel Pereira, like Joaquin Buckley, that went from ultra violent appointment viewing to actual contenders in their divisions. And as unlikely as that seemed, that's kind of the same thing Matt Brown did. Like coming out of that season of Tough, there was no particular reason to believe he was going to be anything special. Like he seemed to me like a bone stock Midwest, top level Midwest journeyman right out of Central Casting. And he just kept refining his game. And for a couple of years there, he was the terror of the division. I mean, he made it to a title eliminator. He dropped the decision to Robbie Lawler that if he had won, he probably would have got the next shot at Johnny Hendricks. In between all that, he has given us just some of the most violent moments, like in the octagon, and a near total lack of non-violent moments. Like, name me a bad Matt Brown fight, even in the twilight of his career. I'll wait.
Johnny Hendricks.
Yeah, that's about it. His finish of Diego Sanchez, where he just uses the kick to run him right into the level elbow. Not even level, because he basically just dunked it on him. I, as a white guy whose age starts with the number 5 do not normally use the word gangster as an adjective, but that's pretty much the most gangster thing I saw in that decade of MMA. So farewell, Matt fucking Brown. Thank you for all the memories.
And Matt Brown, he last fought in 2023. But if you look at his just his demeanor, his attitude towards everything, Matt Brown's, he fits in closer with the type of fighters who are around for UFC 1 than the type of fighters who are around for UFC 300.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, here he is fighting into 2023. Like you said, his retirement was only official this year, but Matt Brown was a throwback if there ever was one, and he was able to continue to evolve. And like you said, just a ball of fury and violence. I think that's a fantastic pick as far as happy trails too, because name somebody who exemplifies MMA better than Matt Brown.
Especially like not counting all-time, pound for pound greats. It would be hard to.
Yeah, no, automatic induction to Hall of fucking Awesome. I said I'm watching my language, but no, you have to say that for Matt Brown.
Yep.
He kind of embodies the fucking moniker. Matt fucking Brown, like he's that dude. He just a dude with like technical but violent Muay Thai. And I've said this term multiple times in this show, and it's very applicable for him, but literally catching bodies in the octagon, just really hurting on his opponents. I have 2 favorite Matt Brown moments. One of them was actually spent with my mother. My mom's first and only MMA fight she's ever watched was at my house, and it was a Matt Brown fight. And my mom is from Cleveland, Ohio. So around that area that Matt Brown resides from, and it was a Matt Brown fight. So that's really awesome. And then and I've always known Matt Brown's fucking awesome, but a couple of years ago, he was on his Instagram covering Omerta by Lamb of God. And I was like, that's the most fucking Matt Brown shit ever. Let's go.
He has a custom walkout track from the guy from Hatebreed. I mean,
yes. Like, I'm like scrolling through it. I see him with his guitar, and then I'm listening. I'm like, he's playing Omerta. Fuck yeah. Let's go. And that would have been a great walkout song for him. Just incredible dude, incredible moments. That was a really good pick, Ben.
I got to throw out one more thing though. I love how Ben opened up discussing how Dimebag Darrell was murdered 20 years ago, and any metalhead knows exactly where they were when they first heard that Dimebag was murdered. I was in a car with a bunch of college students because I was a freshman in college at the time, and I went, hey man, did you hear about Dimebag? I'm like, what do you know about Dimebag Darrell? And then he told me that, and just my heart sank. So I know that you two are metalheads as well, so I love the fact that Ben was able to attach that in there too, because if there's anybody who represents metal in MMA as well, I talk about Matt Brown really just represents so much that's great about MMA, including the metal aspect of it. So yeah, hats off to him.
Dude in his 40s, listening to metal, killing dudes in the octagon with violent Muay Thai. He deserves a salute and a handshake and a pat on the back. Thank you, Matt Brown. My retired fighter that I want to say goodbye to, it's only obvious at this point. It's got to be Demetrious Johnson, Mighty Mouse. He had a hell of a career spanning over decades and multiple organizations. The way he was able to close out his UFC career and go to one championship, do all the stuff he did in the UFC, but like he came to one and like did what every MMA fighter wishes they could do with their career, like take it seriously, but also have fun at the same time. Like that Rod Tang fight, like that was such legendary shit. Like DJ had no fucking reason to fight Rod Tang in that mixed rules bout. And that's like one of the coolest things he did in his career, in my opinion. Yeah, he hit Ray Borg with the flying arm, but like his bravery, to do something like that was just incredible. Fighting Adriano Moraes up at 135 after,
up at 135.
Yeah, hydration, one FC hydration testing one, where like Adriano Moraes is like the size of Max Holloway.
Oh, pretty much. I mean, I've been face to face with Adriano Moraes. I went to one press conference out in LA when they were announcing their Amazon deal, and I was standing like where I could have reached out and touched his shoulder, like close. Buchecha right here, who is 6'2", 220. Like Adriano Moraes is fucking huge. Like how Demetrious Johnson did what he did to him without a trampoline is beyond me.
The clinical finish of Adriano Moraes to go out like that, not many dudes get to leave MMA that way. And we're going to talk about him later, but even a guy like John Jones may not get the luxury of leaving MMA the way that Demetrious Johnson is leaving. The only other guy I could think of that left their career like this is like Khabib, a dude that just kind of, he's got the loss to Cejudo, he's got the knockout loss to Moraes, but the way he came back and the Ben Askren trade, like he just had some really cool, incredible moments. I mean, look at his UFC career, go through his career in the UFC. Yeah, he had the losses to Dominic Cruz and stuff at Bantamweight, but once Flyweight came around, I mean, lapping the division would be an understatement. And then again, the Ray Borg moment was like, that's right next to Max Holloway and Joaquin Buckley on like finishes ever. Like if you ask anyone from the UFC, hey, play me 5 of the best finishes that have ever happened under UFC banner, that one's going to be included. And it may be number 1. If not, it's probably number 2 or number 3. Just an incredible career from Demetrious Johnson. And he still seems to have his wits about him. He's currently in the Umar Nurmagomedov training camp. And, out of all 3 guys, crazy to say, like he's definitely, in my opinion, probably Stipe is incredible. Matt Brown's incredible, but I put DJ even on a higher level, but I still think he's also the most likely to come back.
DJ?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one.
Well, Matt Brown did fight in Fight Circus, but like I don't count that because he did like the t-shirt. Did you see, like he went over to Fight Circus with Mark Coleman, and I think they did like the t-shirt fight.
Yeah.
No, I'm siding with Ben. I hope Ben's wrong because I think Mighty Mouse still has something to add. If he wants to, he would probably have to do it relatively quick because I think he still has something left in the tank, and I would love to see him clash with Pantoja. But I do think he's gone. But yeah, we'll see.
He's in that Umar Nurmagomedov. Oh, can I? I'm wishing upon a star right now, and that's DJ's my star. But he's in the training camp. He looks like he still cares. He has a show where all he does is talk about, like he's now fully on YouTube, where all he does is talk about MMA. And eventually Pantoja's going to beat like another 2 dudes, and the UFC is going to, I don't know. I think it's pretty likely. I also think it's likely Matt Brown comes back for another duel at some, just at some point, like, hey, you want to kill someone? Yeah, sure. Give me Ihor Potieria or something, up 2 weight classes. Some other retirements this year. Any honorable mentions?
I definitely have one. And I might have made him mine if I was sure that he was going to stay away, but I'm not sure that Daniel Pineda is absolutely done. But Pineda, both you guys have done enough shows with me that my take on Daniel Pineda. He is a Houston fixture, and it doesn't get much more metal than having like 42 career fights and never having heard the final horn.
Absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree.
The guy has fought like he was double parked for like 17 years now.
But yeah. Well, okay. If we're being fair, the final horn in victory. He's heard it in losses.
Yeah. He's lost by decision, but yeah, he's 100% finish rate in victory.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I guarantee Daniel Pineda will fight somewhere, someone again. Will it be for money? I'm not sure. But he will
It'll
fight
be
again.
in that Denny's that Ben's always talking about.
It'll be for however much money the other guy's got in his sock.
In a spot, yeah, right. Like, Daniel Pineda, the Pitbull, like he embodies that name Pitbull too. Like win, lose or draw, he's there to go out on a shield. Michelle Watterson got an incredible package from the UFC. Cub Swanson, the UFC built a whole entire promo package for him. He killed Billy Q, and then he doesn't retire, so they play him his retirement package at the desk in the post-fight show. They're like, here, you should watch this because we spent a lot of time doing this. Here's your PowerPoint. And like he was like, yeah, it was like, dude, you had your moment, Cub. Like this is what like you have the opportunity. Like this is what kings are made of, man. And then now you're gonna get matched up against. You're gonna have to rematch the Korean Super Bowl and like die.
You've got your Robbie Lawler moment, buddy. Right off into the wind, right off. But yeah, no, it's MMA, man. They can't do that.
One did a really good job. You should snip that. And I'm gonna say it again. One did a really good job with DJ's retirement. They did give him his moment. That was, on U.S. soil. I think it was in Colorado, correct? And they he didn't retire after a fight, but they gave him his whole moment. I think they dropped confetti in their ring and everything for him to. So he got probably a bigger moment, what it felt like, than if he would have retired out of the UFC, especially at the time where he left, when he was treated like a pawn. Moving on to the final segment of the show, we're going to talk about 2025. 2024 is in the past now. You guys are going to listen to this on the 31st, actually, I believe. We're going to talk about the future of the divisions. We're going to start at women's strawweight, and we're going to move up through, not women's featherweight. We're not going to talk about that. I know PFL has one. And then we're going to run through the men's divisions. And we're going to just talk about who we think is going to be holding the belt still. What champs are a guarantee, what champs are not so much guarantee. And we're going to start with Zhang Weili down at strawweight. She is booked to fight Tatiana Suarez. So Tatiana Suarez would be a pick that potentially makes sense. Or it could be someone else. Dayne, who do you think is going to be the champion at women's strawweight at the end of 2025? So December, 1 year from today.
Given we've already got a fight scheduled for Wang Zhili, this is kind of a little bit of a preview for that, I suppose. But I do believe that Suarez will be the champion at the end of the year. I think that the UFC likes having Wang Zhili. Wow, I am struggling. Zhang Weili as a champ. Giving some rub to China because China's most populous. Well, one of the most populous countries in the world. They go back and forth with India, as far as I know. But regardless, she's an excellent representative for them. But I think that Suarez has a style that is very difficult for Weili to deal with. And I think this is Suarez's moment to shine. And so part of the reason why I say they like having her, I think they'll also give her an immediate rematch before the year's up. And I think Suarez will probably defeat her for a second time and remain champion at the end of the calendar year.
Ben, do you agree?
I actually don't. And that's coming from someone in me that I've been a Suarez backer, but when you told me we were going to do this, I listed out all 11 UFC weight classes, and I just put aside my 3 champs that I thought were most likely to still be holding the belts at the end of 2025, and the 3 that I thought were most likely to lose it at some point. I have Weili Zhang as my 3rd safest champ, and that is 100% me not believing until I see it that Tatiana Suarez is going to be there and be herself. Because even if she hadn't had the leg surgeries, the neck surgeries, the cancer. She'd be getting into an age range where someone with that wrestling heavy a style, you'd be kind of waiting for them to lose a step. The best Tatiana Suarez I've seen is probably the best strawweight of all time, and I would take her over anyone that's held the UFC belt. I just don't know if that woman exists anymore. And I'm not picking anyone else to dethrone Zhang. I think, well, she's already thrashed most of the other women in the strawweight top 10, and I think she will thrash any of the others that make it to the top of the heap. So I think Zhang is still champ at the end of 2025.
No, I totally understand that argument. You know, I mean, we could sit here and have a 30-minute discussion about it the way that you and Keith usually do about these types of matches, but you know, we've got plenty of other divisions. But yeah, no, I think that's a totally respectable take.
I do also believe that Zhang Weili will be the champion at the end of 2025. I'm not sold on Tatiana Suarez 2025. I mean, it took her. If you pause this right now, if you're listening, and go back and watch the Montana De La Rosa fight, Tatiana Suarez came back after being away for 4 years, and like, she did not look that great against Montana De La Rosa. She struggled to take her down, faced a lot of adversity, had to jump guillotine to get that. And Montana De La Rosa she can't hold a candle to Zhang Weili with her athleticism or power or anything at all. And then even the Andrade fight, like, she did, and this was like her second fight back. This is her that earned her title fight. Like, she finished her by sub in the second round, but like, Andrade has been going down. She didn't look that great. But the most telling fight for me with Tatiana Suarez is that Nina Ansaroff fight, where she went out there and dominated Ansaroff, couldn't finish her on the ground in 2 rounds, and then was getting absolutely pieced up and dropped the third round bad in that fight. She gets into that. She has that fight with Zhang Weili. She's getting finished. Zhang Weili has shown her survivability. She's really athletic, really strong. I don't see. I mean, it took Tatiana Suarez, when she was at the best of her powers, 3 rounds to finish Carla Esparza. And we saw with Zhang Weili, she crumpled her up into a ball and threw her out of the cage. I do think Zhang Weili is safe, and it's outside of Tatiana Suarez's skills. I can't believe the UFC's even given her a title fight. I just don't. She might not fight. I'm not sure Tatiana Suarez is in a fight until the ref says go. Moving up a division, women's 125, women's flyweight. We have a very long reigning champ, a staple of WMMA at this point. Shevchenko is currently the champ there. Ben, who do you think is going to end the year as the women's flyweight champion?
Well, gun to my head, I think it's Shevchenko, but having said that, I have her down as my second unsafest champ. At this point, Shevchenko has proven herself to be marginally superior to Alexa Grasso, but I look at the way that Grasso beat her in their first matchup and the way that she was at least competitive the other times, and I see other women in the division who could do it as well, if not better. Like, watching the Grasso trilogy makes me think that Manon Fior has a pretty good chance of beating Shevchenko. I mean, even Erin Blanchfield might. Like, she's going to have trouble on the feet, but Shevchenko has used the ground as a safety valve more and more as she's kind of gotten older, as you know, as a champ. So yeah, I think it's probably Shevchenko, but I think she's one of the more vulnerable champs this year.
Dayne, who do you think is going to be the women's flyweight champion this day 1 year from today?
I think the way that Ben summed it up is perfect. But I will also say that I think that Manon Fiorot will be the champion at the end of the year. Valentina does have vulnerabilities, but there's a couple of other things with regards to signs of slippage. Number one, she'll be 37 by the time she fights her next fight. And number two, Firo has proven that she's not easy to take down. And, kind of the way that Ben was talking about, that's Valentina's safety net as of late. When she was struggling with Tyla Santos, take her down. When she dominated Grasso in the third fight of their trilogy, it was because she took her down time and time again and held her down and controlled her. I don't know how easy it's going to be for her to do that with Firo. And if the fight's a stand-up fight, I favor Firo. And I think that her bigger and stronger frame than what Grasso presents is going to allow her to stay standing and dethrone Shevchenko whenever that fight gets scheduled.
How long will it take the UFC to sign Dakota Ditcheva? This is a tough division because it had so many moving pieces and it seemed to be moving along. And then the Shevchenko Grasso trilogy happened. Shevchenko, that belt was fought for like once a year. Shevchenko only fought one time in 2024. I think that they were kind of holding that. I think they were kind of doing that for the Sphere card. They really needed someone, for the Mexican Independence Day. And I think they were like, well, we have one chance to do this, so we can't let Grasso fight anyone else. Shevchenko did absolutely dominate her in their third fight. And I look at who's ranked in that division, and it's like, okay, well, I see Macy Barber there. Macy Barber could, definitely put up a good fight, but she can't even can Macy Barber even get to a point where she cuts weight for a fight, or will something with her health happen? Because she seems to have a lot of health issues. Erin Blanchfield, she kind of, hate to use the term, got exposed in her last time out, but she kind of did in a way, which really does leave Manon Fiorot and Alexa Grasso. I don't think Valentina's fighting Grasso. Pray to God she doesn't for a fourth time. So Manon Fiorot is the title challenger. I think that's just like a 50-50 fight. Like I could totally see Shevchenko doing what she did to Grasso last time out to Fiorot. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I think the safe bet, because if you got someone that can strike and really, really grapple their ass off, and one person, I think it's always smart to go with the grappler and go with the more tenured person. So I'm going to pick Shevchenko. The wild card is if they do try to say, hey, Shevchenko, hurry up. We need you to fight Manon Fiorot. If you win that fight, we can give you a super fight with Zhang Weili if Zhang Weili gets through Tatiana Suarez. That is something we might see in 2026 if both of those women win their fights. And if that happens, it's going to be at 125. That's where shit gets pretty confusing for me. But I think Shevchenko is probably the safe and smart bet. But Manon Fiorot is right there, and she's a hell of a fighter as well. Moving up to the, best. Was that a laugh, Dayne?
I didn't say anything.
Moving up to really the best division in MMA, women's bantamweight. Currently, the gal at the top of the mountain waving her flag is Juliana Pena. I'm looking at the UFC rankings, and why is Raquel Pennington ranked number 1 and Kayla Harrison ranked number 2? Like, I know it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, they always give like the former champions the number 1 spot after they've been dethroned. So yeah,
it's just the dumbest thing ever. I'm gonna go first. This is signed, sealed, delivered. Like, it's Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison's toughest fight in this division is with the scale. That's it. I don't see, and I do think really her toughest fight in the division is someone like Norma Dumont. And I could totally see that fight happening at the end of this year, Harrison versus Dumont for the title, but it's Kayla Harrison. Kayla Harrison she's the bantamweight champion for as long as she's an active fighter on this roster. It would be hilarious though if Juliana Pena does the same thing she did to Nunes in the first fight and gets this like trilogy with Kayla Harrison, because Kayla Harrison would get the immediate rematch even though she's the challenger, and it would be really funny. I'm actually almost hoping that happens, and I'll still put Kayla Harrison because they'll make it happen all within a year, and Kayla Harrison would still come back and win. It's Kayla Harrison. Ben.
I also think that the UFC Women's Bantamweight champ will be Kayla Harrison at the end of 2025. And of all 11 current champs in the UFC, Juliana Pena is the only one that I actually think is more than 50% likely to not be champ at the end of this year. Like I have some that I think are more vulnerable than others, but even though we know that, it's not going to be 10 out of 11 of the same champs at the end of this year, each of them is individually more than 50% likely to,
retain.
Yeah.
Regardless of the betting
title for
odds.
the year. Yeah.
I was just giggling because I'm just like remembering the Nunes fight, the first Nunes fight, and it's like, she's jabbing. Like, Dayne, who's going to be the women's bantamweight champion at the end of 2025 and 1 year from today?
So I think that there needs to be a caveat thrown out here. That is if Juliana Pena defends her belt, because she has been on the UFC roster since 2013, and she has fought a total of 11 times. So if, that's once a year. So I would not be surprised if some way, somehow she sits out the entire year. It could be a legit reason, injury or whatever.
Okay, so who'll be champ at the end of the year?
The UFC will strip her ass faster than they did Colby Covington for Kayla Harrison. They're like, we've got Kayla Harrison for this long. There is no way she's not fighting for a title. I mean, the UFC will drive to Spokane, Washington, and pry that belt. They'll take it. Dana will take that from her house.
Why the hell didn't they just give Harrison the title fight in the first place anyway? No, I am with you. Harrison, I do think will be the champion at the end of the year, but just Pena, she's kind of a head case, so I could see some way, somehow her just kind of taking the belt and going home, or giving one reason after another why she doesn't have to defend it, because you can tell she is one of those who absolutely loves being champion. And I think that she will do everything within her power to avoid having to defend it, just because I don't think she's scared. I just think that she loves the belt so damn much that I don't want to give this up.
She's pulling through the drive-through coffee stands with the belt in her hand, trying to get a free coffee with that belt. Like, hey, I'm the champ. Let me get a coffee.
Oh, dude, she's walking around like Tim Sylvia back in the day, just wearing the belt everywhere.
Unlike Marab, who goes everywhere and climbs everything, but he doesn't do any of that shit with the belt. Dude, if you're gonna climb like a 4-story scaffolding, fuck it, just wear the belt. Like, if you're gonna do all that type of crazy shit, just wear the belt, man. Kayla Harrison, there's just no that I mean, there's so many factors that just lead her to being the champion. Her inability to continuously make the weight cut, number one, where the UFC like knows they're having to play hurry up offense with Kayla Harrison. Like, we got to get this shit rolling here with her. And the fact that the matchup, I mean, what would the betting odds be?
Harrison minus 400.
I was going to say 350, so we're in the same ballpark.
I'm thinking 12. Call me crazy.
No.
You're crazy. like Nunes wasn't that big a favorite over Pena, and she was the best fighter on the planet at the time.
Kayla Harrison just seems like so inevitable. Just got the Thanos energy. All right, we're gonna move down a weight class, but over a gender. We're gonna move on to men's flyweight. Current sitting champion is Alejandro Pantoja. It's a dude that's, and I'm going to go first. Pantoja's a dude that's taken me way too long to get behind. And that's just my own fault. But Pantoja's been looking incredible. And it seems like it seems like they're having him fight Kai Kara France again. We know that Royval and Kopp are booked in a title eliminator, so Kara France makes the most sense as his next title challenger. Pantoja's a guy that likes to stay active. He is getting a little bit older for flyweight, but he's like, I mean, a year ago, if someone would have told me Pantoja is getting closer to DJ, I would have laughed. But like that shit's coming pretty quick. I still think he'll be the champ at the end of 2025. Like I'm looking at the rankings and it's like, okay, well, I think Brandon Moreno probably has the best chance to beat him, and they've fought 3 times already and he's lost all of them. Manel Kopp looked great against Bruno Silva. He's not doing that shit to Pantoja, dude. Like, you can't fight with shoes on. He's not going to be able to do that to Pantoja. And we've seen the Royval fight. Yeah, Royval did better in their second fight, but like it was still clear as day for Pantoja. I don't see how do any of these guys beat Pantoja? Do they knock him out? No. Do they out scramble him? No. Do they out cardio him? No. He deserves a lot more respect in the pound for pound rankings, and Pantoja deserves a lot more respect in the MMA community. I know you guys respect the shit out of him like I do, but I'm rocking with Pantoja, man. Ben's flyweight.
I also think Alexandre Pantoja will be the UFC men's flyweight champ at the end of 2025. And I think of him as a relatively secure champ, which flyweight has not had since Demetrious Johnson. Like, there was this constant state of turnover because as awesome as Figueiredo and Moreno and Pantoja and Royval and Alex Perez all were, they were all so aggro. Like, how many times in the history of the sport has the entire top 6 or 7 fighters in the division been such a bunch of fucking psychopaths? It was amazing, but it also showed how difficult it was to do the DJ thing and defend your title 11 times in a row. Pantoja seems just a little bit more settled down. Maybe turning 36 or whatever he is was the best thing for him. And more importantly, because he's been around so long, I mean, you just talked about people that he's already beaten twice, already beaten 3 times. This guy he's exhausting his pool of available contenders worse than Israel Adesanya was a couple years ago, where he was, trying to come up with other things to do even to stay busy. It's why someone like Kai Asakura just came straight into the UFC, dropped a full weight class and went straight into a title shot. Pantoja is probably going to be flyweight champ at the end of this year, more than anything, just because I don't see anybody who's got what it takes to take it from him.
And comparing him to Israel Adesanya, like the dude's Izzy beat on the way up and the manner and the way he beat them, lackluster could be an understatement. Unimpressive could be an understatement. Pound for pound, best fighters in the world. Like, he's doing this to dudes that are like top 30 pound for pound fighters, like, in the world. Brandon Moreno, like, beating that dude 3 times. How good is Brandon Moreno? He's literally one of the best 20 fighters in the whole entire world. He's Pantoja's just fucking incredible. Dayne, do you agree with us? Do you have something else in mind?
So thus far, I predicted a clean sweep of the women's divisions, having new champions, but I agree that Pantoja will hold on to his belt. I think you're right. I think the UFC is trying to circle contest with him with Kai Kara France. Kara France is a fan favorite as far as the flyweights go. It would be a fun fight. It would be an exciting fight. It'll probably happen close to the middle of the year. I think he defends against him. And then the question at that point is, does Pantoja get a second title defense in the calendar year of 2025? I don't know. And if he does, it's a complete mystery as to who it might be. I think like that's why I hope that the UFC backs up a Brinks truck to Mighty Mouse and says, please come back. This division needs this. It's a legacy fight. But, like we touched on it earlier, I don't think that Mighty Mouse is going to budge because he's the type of guy that usually tends to say what he means and means what he says. So based on all that, I'll play the odds and say Pantoja holds onto his belt through the year.
Smart bet. And what are you going to do? Knock him out? I mean, once Pantoja loses, I think that's how he's going to lose his title. One of those shots that he's just eaten all his career. Well, the one shot we're just going to be like, oh God, that hurt him real bad. He's done. But I mean, there's been nothing to even give me a hint that that's going to happen anytime soon. Moving up, we're shooting up 10 pounds. Men's bantamweight in kind of one of the more highly stacked divisions in the UFC. And we've got a dude currently as the champ there that, I mean, Rob Dvalishvili might have the most impressive UFC, record as a current holding champion. Maybe Islam is there next to him. But Merab's beat a lot of good dudes. I'm going to go first. Merab's biggest problem is his next fight that he's booked for in February. He's fighting Umar Nurmagomedov, which is a real tough fight for anyone. Besides that, he's, I don't want to say he's cleaned out the division, but he's beat a lot of dudes. And I think whoever wins the next fight at men's bantamweight for the title will be the one that retains it through the end of the year, because if Merab figures out a way to beat Umar, I don't see who's beating that dude. And if Umar figures out a way to beat Merab, I don't see, whoever wins that next fight, I don't know who's going to beat him. And a lot of people are probably going to pick Umar Nurmagomedov, and that's probably the safe and smart bet. But I'm not going to count Merab out anymore. I think Merab can give Umar a lot of problems in a fight. And if he does figure out a way to beat Umar, I'm just going to pick him to do the same thing to Figgy or Sandhagen or Petrion in a rematch, or Sean O'Malley in a rematch. So give me Merab. I know I'm probably going to be on an island there, but I think Merab's going to retain. I think he beats Umar and then has a much easier fight for whoever comes next. And I think if he beats Umar, it's by the skin of his teeth. He also might get knocked dead. Ben, who do you think is going to be the men's bantamweight champ?
I think the UFC men's bantamweight champ at the end of 2025 will be Merab Dvalishvili. I do have him down as my third least secure champ, just because of the job in front of him immediately. But having said that, I haven't really gotten into the tape yet, but as a item of general principle, I am never going to pick against Merab Dvalishvili in a 5-round fight until I'm proven wrong. He is a guy that, more obviously than maybe anybody else in the sport, was built for 5-round fights. He is a guy that weaponizes pace and cardio like nobody else in the sport right now, like very few people in the history of the sport. Yeah, I don't care that he's smaller. I don't care that he's older. I don't care that his striking isn't as polished, and he may not even be as good a wrestler in round 1. I'm not picking against Merab in a 5-round fight until I'm proven wrong.
I thought I was going to be crazy. Dayne, are you going to tell us we're both crazy?
I'll disagree with you, but you're not crazy. The UFC has a way of manipulating things to get desired outcomes. I think they very much did that when Sean O'Malley beat Aljamain Sterling to become the champion. Sterling had a pretty quick turnaround. O'Malley was able to sit on the sidelines for almost a year. I don't think the UFC likes Merab as their champion for whatever reason, and so I think that they've kind of manipulated him into defending his belt in less than optimal circumstances. I'm not going to say it's a entirely quick turnaround because Merab fought in September, but that's 4 months. You know, fighters or champions generally get about a 6 months leeway of time. But they're having Merab do a quick turnaround. I think it'll be Umar at the end of the year. If this was a situation where I didn't see the UFC's fingerprints all over this, I probably would pick Merab, but I think they want Umar as champion. And I think that things are dictating so that Umar will be champion by the end of the year.
So you're telling me the UFC doesn't love the fact that Merab is willing to get into a public altercation at every place they bring him, but then they bring him there still? Like, we don't like Merab. He fights at the PI, but like, hey, bro, here you go. Like, I don't know.
I'm just for whatever reason, this side of Chris Weidman, they don't seem to like the Sarah Longo guys. You know, they haven't exactly been very favorable with the matchups that they've been given Stephen Thompson. We all can tell that they have. Yeah, they obviously do not like Aljo. They put him and Mobsar on the prelims, and that was one of my favorite fights of the year personally. That was just so damn good. And then, yeah, Merab, they made him fight who knows how many guys before he finally got his title shot. Like, he should have been next to fight O'Malley as soon as O'Malley dethroned Sterling, but they threw O'Malley a bone, let him avenge his loss to Chito Vera, and, made Merab go and beat Henry Cejudo. They don't like Merab. I don't know why. I think Merab's hilarious. You know, his
he's awesome.
Stealing O'Malley's coat while O'Malley was facing off with Aljo. That was flipping hilarious. You know, he just pops up in between them in the camera and he's smiling, got the coat on. Yeah. No, I love Merab, but for whatever reason the UFC doesn't. I think they're manipulating him to lose the belt.
Merab is just like a little mini King Kong, just like climbing to the tops of like all these buildings and shit. Like, he's so funny. Like, dude, he got kicked out of the PI like 4 or 5 days ago. I'm sure you guys saw that because like, dude, like climbing up. There is no building Merab can't climb. Like, him scaling the side of the bleachers to fight like a fan that just like said a mean word to him. Like, dude, you gotta stop. And these guys both have their hardest fights of their career potentially in their next bouts between Umar and Merab. So it's literally a coin flip for me. And then I think whoever they face next, look down in the rankings. I'd pick Umar to beat O'Malley, which is probably, O'Malley's probably fighting for the title next, and I pick both of these guys to beat him too. Moving up, we're gonna talk about our Fighter of the Year's division. Men's featherweight. Ilia Topuria is the current champion. This past year, we talked about him a little bit ago. Dayne, you're first. Will Ilia Topuria retain his title for the next year, or will, Brian Ortega crack his beak and become the Eagle again?
No, Ilia is holding on to the belt through the end of the year. He's at this point, he is, Ben had a list of fighters that he found to be most safe and those that he found to be least safe. In my opinion, Ilia is the most safe. And that's really saying something because featherweight is a shark tank. There is a lot of worthy guys. The problem is that Ilia has already just dominated the two biggest sharks in that tank aside from himself. Bad enough that we're questioning how good Volk was just because Ilia just dropped him in such a violent manner. And then everybody loves Max Holloway, but he did the same thing to him to the point where Max is going to a different division. There's obviously more to that. It's not like Max is actually running from Ilia or anything like that. It's something that Max has been contemplating for a while, but that's still a hell of an accomplishment. So who does Ilia face next? Is it going to be Diego Lopez? Is it going to be Movsar Evloev? Who knows? Maybe he faces Arnold Allen by the end of the year if Allen gets one more impressive win or something like that and injuries happen. I don't know. There's a lot of guys that are worthy to be able to step up and face him as title challengers. But every single one of them that I look at, I just think Ilya's a clear step above them. And I don't think that Ilya is in his prime yet. I think he's going to get better. And I think he is going to be champion for a long, long time. So he will be champion at the end of the year.
Ben, who is the men's featherweight champion at the end of the year?
It's Ilia Topuria, and he is my second safest champ across all 11 UFC divisions. It's a combination of just how good he is, what a groove he seems to be in, and then, yeah, the state of the top of the division. I should have mentioned this in the last segment, but if Bellator elite fighters keep complaining, they can make a splash in both these divisions. Like if Sergio Pettis and Patchy Mix and Rafion Stotts all come to the UFC, they all slot in as top 10, 12 bantamweights in that in an already deep division. Same. Patricio Pitbull's making noise.
Yeah.
I think Ilya would have him, especially considering that Pitbull's about to be 38, but I sure as hell want to see it. But yeah, it's Topuria, and he's pretty damn safe.
I'm looking at the UFC's featherweight rankings right now. I'm not looking at the Sherdog ones because that's going to include other organizations, and we're talking about the UFC. Yeah, it's Topuria almost seems. I'm surprised who you have over him. I'll be surprised to hear who that is. It's probably Islam, but as your number one safest. But like, I'm looking at like I'm not picking Holloway to beat him again. I'm not picking Volk to beat him again. Yeah, Diego Lopez comes out like a bat out of hell. He has an incredible first round. I mean, he can, he knocked out Brian Ortega and then literally woke him back up with another punch. He's got incredibly fast hands, incredible power. He could, go out there and maybe shock Ilia Topuria, but I mean, over 5 rounds, Ilia Topuria would. I wouldn't just pick Ilia Topuria to beat everyone in the top 15. Looking at the rankings, I'd pick him to knock them all out too. And I can't say that about anyone else, any other champ. But like, Edson Barboza at 15, Josh Emmett's ranked number 8. He 10-7'd him. That means he should have already knocked, I'd pick him to finish Arnold Allen. I'd pick him to finish Brian Ortega. I'd pick him to finish Yair Rodriguez. The only dude that, maybe not Movzar, but Movzar on the feet looks so bad against Aljo. Like, I pick Ilia to win all these fights and win them by finish. I think Topuria is probably the safest dude just based on the rest of the competition. And that's saying so much because Volkanovski and Max Holloway are ranked number 1 and number 2. And those dudes are, do we have any other division on the UFC roster where the 1, 2, and 3 guys are all in the top 15 pound for pound rankings?
I can't imagine. No.
How would you pick Ilia to beat those 2 dudes again?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And how would he beat them?
Badly.
Not too far off how he did the first time. Yeah.
That's saying a lot. So for me, it's Ilia Topuria, signed, sealed, and delivered. Moving up to the number 1 pound for pound ranked fighters division. We've got men's lightweight and another incredibly stacked division. Islam Makhachev is currently the champion. He is booked to fight in February. So in about like a month and a half, I think it's February 11th. Is that?
Yes.
So he'll be fighting Arman Sarukian on February 11th. Probably his hardest.
Sorry. That's January
11th.
Yeah.
Or 18th.
Oh,
January,
18th, you're right.
Yeah, January 11th is the first fight night of the year. January
Yes.
18th is UFC 311.
Okay,
Yes.
so I need to walk that back.
It's the 11 there. 311, and then January 11th. That's what was but yes.
311 is amber the color of your energy. All right. Yeah. They came to concert out here where I live. I won't disclose where I live, but you guys know where I live at a casino out here. And I was like, nah, dude, that's gotta be sad. But Islam Makhachev's currently the champion. He's got a fight coming up soon. Ben, does Islam retain? Does he continue this onslaught of the division?
Yes, I believe that Islam Makhachev will be the UFC lightweight champ at the end of 2025. He is my safest champ of the year. Neck and neck with Topuria, whom I had second. What it came down to for me is Makhachev, it's almost like he's still improving, and he is. And he has cleaned out his division to an extent that Topuria really hasn't. I mean, he's fighting in a couple weeks against someone he's already beaten once. And while they're both different fighters, Makhachev has improved at least as much as Sarukian has. Then you go down the list. Like, for him not to be champ at the end of this year would take one of the biggest upsets in MMA history.
I'm going to go second, and I'm going to agree with you. Like, I'm not going to do the whole thing where I pick apart the division like Topuria. But I think Islam's biggest threat is Topuria, and that's a dude that's in another division. Yeah, Charles Oliveira might be able to do something. Dustin Poirier is not fighting him again. Justin Gaethje is not beating Islam Makhachev. Max Holloway, love him to death, and he could have got himself a title fight against Islam. Not like it would have probably gone any better. But yeah, Islam's most dangerous fight is going to be him chasing greatness at 170, realistically, in my opinion. And he's not doing that because he's good friends with the champ. So I'm picking, and based on Islam, and he's probably only going to fight once in 2025 because he's going to beat Arman Sarukian, and then he's going to be holding a ticket for a welterweight title fight, and he just has to see, how Bilal Muhammad's fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov turns out. So it's Islam for me. Dane?
I'll make it unanimous. That is, I do believe that Arman is deservingly so the top contender within the division, and I do fear that Islam is probably looking past him. I hate when champions start talking about moving up to another division because that means that they're looking past what they have in front of them, and so there is a part of me that fears that he's doing that. I honestly considered saying that I think Arman will upset him, but like Ben says, that Islam has improved just as much as Arman in the from their first fight, and it was a close fight, but it wasn't close enough that you couldn't tell who clearly won it. I think Islam retains his belt, and whoever he faces next, I don't think it's going to be too much for him to overcome. It could be Oliveira next. I think that's who most of us think. I think he would beat him again in a rematch. So I think I would probably disagree with him being the safest champion, in terms of what Ben said, because I do think Arman is that big of a threat to him as compared to whoever Ilya will face next. But yeah, I do think Islam will be champion at the end of the year.
We're going to move up to a division that's kind of gotten old overnight, in my opinion. A division that was like super highly touted through 2023 and 2022, kind of through COVID, but things have really seemed to start shifting at men's welterweight. Currently the champion is Bilal Muhammad, and I'm going to go first. And at the end of 2025, I think Bilal Muhammad's probably still the champion again. I think he will. I look at the division and I just see he might squeeze out 2 fights in this year, but I think he beats Shavkat Rakhmonov, and then maybe Joaquin Buckley can figure out a way to swindle his way into a title fight with a close win over Leon Edwards, and I think he beat him too. I think the person that beats Bilal Muhammad is going to have to be a big puncher with good anti-wrestling and someone that can hurt him quickly. And I'm looking at the dudes that are going to be in title eliminators, and maybe JDM can do that. But after Shavkat Rakhmonov's last fight, if that was the fight that needed to convince me needed to. I wasn't all the way convinced. So for me, it's Bilal Muhammad. Actually, I think Bilal Muhammad. Dane, who's the men's welterweight champ?
I'm with you. It'll be Bilal at the end of the year. I think if Shavkat were to fight Bilal, lose, and then be able to rematch him, I think Shavkat would probably win that. But if that rematch is to happen, it's not going to happen within this year because there's enough other contenders. Because I think Shavkat's intelligence is underrated, but Bilal is the type of animal that everybody underrates until they get into the cage with him, just because he fights at such an insane pace that, you know, even though fighters think that they're prepared for it, they're not. And I think that's the biggest problem that Shavkat would have going forward, because, you know, Shavkat's not a fast-paced guy by any means. You know, he very much just kind of seems to wait for something to happen, and then when it does, it's usually just a ball of violence. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure who Bilal would face if he has a second title defense in the year. But running through the names, like you said, you know, there's JDM, maybe Sean Brady works his way into there, or Joaquin Buckley. I think Bilal beats all of them, so Bilal will be champion at the end of the year.
Ben, do you agree with us? Do you disagree?
I agree. I believe that Bilal Muhammad will be the UFC welterweight champ at the end of 2025. And I'm not sure I would have said that before the Rakhmonov Gary fight. But seeing Rakhmonov be the better ground fighter than Ian Gary, but very competitive. I mean, he was fighting for his life in the last round. Bilal Muhammad steamrolls this guy in the later rounds. He like a XXL Marab, weaponized pace and cardio that if you can't hang, he's going to run you ragged. It's not just that he's going to win the last couple rounds. Like, you're not going to make it to the finish line.
I think when Bilal Muhammad fights Shavkat Rakhmonov, it's going to look real similar to Marab versus Petrian. I think it's going to look real similar to that. A dude with just like an even cleaner boxing, like a dude with just a willing ass front foot boxing game that's like sneakier and craftier in the pocket. And then the second your back touches the cage, like you're just getting chain wrestled with high singles and all sorts of cool stuff, like in a flood. I'm glad we all picked Bilal Muhammad, because there's so many people that you still hate on that dude, but you better remember that name. Moving up to a division with the last three champions are all really cool and funny in their own way. Dricus du Plessis is the current champion at middleweight, the best worst fighter I've ever seen. What does he do? Nothing. What does he do? Everything. Dricus du Plessis is the current champ. I'm gonna go first. And I don't think Dricus du Plessis will end 2025 as the champ. I do think at middleweight it's going to be Khamzat Chimaev. And the reason why I say that is because I do think Khamzat can beat the winner of Strickland du Plessis. And he's only going to fight one time in 2025. So I think whoever Khamzat fights, he will likely beat. But if Dricus figures out a way to beat Sean again, that's totally his toughest fight. Dricus is just like a little, not little, but I mean, just like a geo dude, just built from stone, kind of unkillable, really crafty and weird, and always remaining thoughtful in fights, even when he's doing all the wrong things. But a guy like Khamzat, you know, I've used the term inevitable already, and he's, I mean, how long has he seemed inevitable? Khamzat Chimaev has seemed inevitable since his Reese McKee fight back on Fight Island. Give me Khamzat to end the year as the middleweight champion. Dane, do you agree? Do you disagree? Who do you have?
Yeah, no, he's inevitable. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It doesn't matter if he gets DDP or Strickland next. I think he's going to do the same thing to one that he would do to the other, and walk out with the UFC's big gold belt. It sounds kind of disrespectful to say that to both DDP and Sean Strickland, but in all honesty, it's less disrespectful to them and more just how impressive Hamzat is. If there's anybody that's going to stop him, it's going to be himself, which I wouldn't necessarily put past him at this point, But no, the UFC is they seem dead set to have him become champion by the end of the year. I think that the only reason DDP and Strickland are going at it is a couple of reasons. Number one, they told Strickland that he would have next, and number two, they wanted a title fight on the card in Australia outside of Whaley and Suarez, and this will fit the bill. And given that, ironically enough, given Hamzat has the record or the modern record for fewest amount of time in between wins, he's not somebody that fights very often at this point. So they weren't going to try to rush him back after fighting Whitaker. That's the reason why this fight's happening. Hamzat will be the champion by the end of the year, regardless of who wins this next fight.
What do you think, Ben?
I think Dricus du Plessis will be the UFC middleweight champ at the end of 2025. If I had to put odds on it, I'd say he's about 60% likely. And if you break out that 60%, 30% is he fights Hamzat late in the year and wins. 30% is that Hamzat Chimaev does not fight at all in 2025. We're talking about a guy that has had health issues that have had him like threatening to retire multiple times already, and he's like 29 years old, and he's a little bit of a head case. So, yeah, but even if they fight, I'm not counting out du Plessis there. I think he's one of the very, very, very few people in that division that can at least rival Chimaev's just raw physical horsepower and athleticism.
And just not die in the first round. You know, like he's, even though he's been on the razor's edge of death in like 15 fights, in every single fight that he's been in, Dricus du Plessis somehow finds a way to, pull a rabbit out of the hat over and over again. It's like he just has a hat with a ton of rabbits in it, apparently. And if, like you said, if anyone, I do think Hamzat versus DDP is, even Hamzat versus Strickland, both of those fights could be potentially a lot closer, especially if one of those dudes, if a third round starts against any of those, against either one of those dudes, especially what we know about both of those dudes, my view on Hamzat being champ at the end of the year is going to get real little. We are going to move up to men's light heavyweight. And there's a dude that's up there right now, Alex Pereira, that if you told me like 2 years ago about Alex Pereira and what he's done, in 2020, in 2023 and 2024, I'd be like, you're crazy, you're high, there's no way. But no, Alex Pereira is just like out here doing things, looking real good while he's catching bodies. Dayne, will Alex Pereira remain the men's light heavyweight champion 1 year from today?
Yes. Everybody's saying that Magomed Ankalaev is his kryptonite. And I do believe that Ankalaev is a bad stylistic matchup for him, but that he's not an unbeatable matchup for him. And Pereira's, I think this is the longest amount of time that he's been on the sidelines without having a fight announced in quite a while. We're coming up on 3 months, which is pretty freaking impressive if we're being honest. So hopefully he's taking some time to heal himself. He says that he's not fighting Ankalaev next, but I don't know. He very well could be playing head games with Ankalaev, but there's another part of me that says that's not the style of Pereira. He's, when Hill was saying that I've got you next, what was Pereira's response? Okay. That's just the type of guy that he is. But I do think at some point he finds Ankalaev. I do think that he will defeat him. I don't know who the UFC would throw at him after that. I think there's a possibility that he might just sit on the sidelines and wait for something to happen between John Jones and Tom Aspinall, because he keeps talking about wanting to move up to heavyweight, and I think that if the UFC thinks that the dollar signs are there, that they would allow him to do so. So there's no guarantee. I think that he gets 2 defenses this year. If he does, I don't know, maybe they throw Nikita Krylov in there, and oh my good hell, that would just be a bundle of confusion. We'll put it that way. Just, I would love to see Nikita Krylov fight Alex Pereira just for entertainment purposes. Regardless, I think Pereira is the champion at the end of the year.
Ben, who is the men's light heavyweight champion in 1 year from today?
I also believe it's Alex Pereira. If I had to guess, I'd say he defends against Magomed Ankalaev sometime in the first half of the year, defends against Carlos Ulberg in the fourth quarter. I think like if the UFC can make the Ulberg fight, I think they'll want to. Ulberg would make an extremely marketable champ. There's a little bit of intrigue built right into the fight just because of the city kickboxing thing. So, but regardless of who he fights, I think Pereira is still holding the belt at the end of the year.
I am in agreement, and I think Pereira is at the point of where he is no longer going to be willing to be playing speed chess, for the UFC anymore. I think he has fought his way into fights where the fans and himself are demanding, him to fight for the heavyweight title and stuff like that. So I don't think Pereira is just going to be fighting, random dudes that are ranked 10 to 6 in this division anymore. I do think he beats Magomed Ankalaev because could somebody with a smarter brain than Magomed Ankalaev, with all of Magomed Ankalaev's skills, beat Alex Pereira? Yes. Somebody, you put that you put those skills into somebody like a DC or something, like, yeah, they beat Pereira. But you go look in that division and you look at Magomed Ankalaev, and Ben, this is a term that you say about Magomed Ankalaev, and I have stolen this, but like, he will walk across the street to go step in dog shit. And Magomed Ankalaev is not an extremely responsible fighter with his fight IQ, and everything that Jan Blachowicz did, Pereira could totally do to him as well. And then I think it just depends on what the end of the year looks like for the heavyweight division. And I think Jan Blachowicz is probably, style-wise, Alex Pereira's toughest fight in this division. And that means Jan Blachowicz has to come back after like neck surgery. He's like 42, and he actually has to beat Carlos Ulberg, who's a good, dangerous fighter himself. But yeah, someone like Jan Blachowicz, who arguably did beat Pereira at his 205 debut in Salt Lake City at Elevation, that was a really close fight. Jan Blachowicz is defensively responsible and has good kickboxing himself. I mean, he outstruck Israel Adesanya and took him down and kind of dominated Izzy. So I won't count Jan Blachowicz out, but age, I don't think Pereira is going to be playing speed chess trying to fight 3-4 dudes in 2025. I think Alex makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to pick Alex as well. The final division we're going to talk about, and the final talking point, thank you guys both for joining me on this little bit longer of a show. We're going to talk about men's heavyweight. The current champ is John Bones Jones. And I mean, really Tom Aspinall. But if you go to the UFC's website, John Jones's pretty face is on there. And Tom Aspinall is ranked number 1 with an little interim word next to his name. Ben, who is the men's heavyweight champion for the UFC 1 year from today at the end of 2025?
I think it's probably John Jones. What I would see is the most likely outcome is he does agree to fight Aspinall, either in England, or he'll save it for next November at Madison Square Garden. He likes to fight there. Wins, and if he's not champ at the end of the year, it's because he retires in the cage.
Dayne, who's the champ at men's heavyweight?
Everybody wants to see Jones and Aspinall clash, and understandably so. That could end up being the most anticipated heavyweight fight since Fedor and Crow Cop. Given there's a lot of people who were not following the sport at that time, that means that by sheer numbers, it'll probably be the most anticipated heavyweight fight. But we all know Jones' biggest enemy is himself. And in that regards, it means that if he's not motivated, he's going to be lazy. He knows everybody wants to see him fight Aspinall. He knows there's a lot of people who thinks that Aspinall would beat him. And a motivated John Jones is still the baddest man on the planet. So I agree that Jones will likely end up winning that fight. And beyond that, kind of like I indicated a little bit earlier, I think Jones, I don't think he's the smartest man with money. So I think he would probably hold out for one more payday. And I think he could get that if Alex Pereira remains champion at the end of the year. I don't think Jones will retire if he beats Aspinall. I think he will hold out for Pereira. So I think Jones remains champion at the end of the year.
Men's heavyweight is tough because a really easy and almost smart thing to say would be John Jones just like holds the belt and refuses to fight Tom Aspinall, asks for Deontay Wilder money, aka fuck you money, and then just holds the belt. The UFC won't do anything to John Jones, and he can just hold the belt. And then this time next year, he could say, hey, I'm done. I do think if Tom Aspinall fights John Jones, I watched the Stipe fight again. Stipe had way more success than I remembered. Watching it back a sec, I watched it like 2 nights ago. Stipe had a ton of success. Like he was hitting that pull back counter in a way slower old man way that he hit against like Fedor. Obviously, it didn't do much damage, but like I'm not convinced Jones is of who he used to be. And I would probably pick Tom Aspinall to win that fight. It is a close fight, and it is John Jones. But John Jones is the smart and safe pick, but I'm going to try to will Tom Aspinall's real true heavyweight championness to existence. So I'm going to say Tom Aspinall is the champ there. And if they can get John Jones figured out and Tom Aspinall does actually beat John Jones, his next fight at heavyweight will probably be Alex Pereira. And I mean, imagine if in 2025 Tom Aspinall beats John Jones and Alex Pereira in back-to-back fights. That would be
the greatest year of any fighter in MMA history.
It would cement him as the GOAT.
Yeah,
it's possible. It's possible. And if he wins those fights, he's going to probably win them the same way he's won all of his other ones. And if Tom Aspinall, if you are listening to this, dude, like, you don't wait for John Jones forever. If he doesn't do anything, if he's not willing to fight you in 6 months, just call someone else out, man.
Don't be Michael Chandler.
Don't. We've seen it not work. He's now going to probably fight Paddy Pimblett and probably lose. Don't be Michael Chandler. Guys, thank you both so much for joining me. That's the show. 2024 was a hell of a year. I appreciate all the opportunities I've had with Sherdog. I appreciate the opportunities I've had to do stuff like this with you guys. Ben, any final words for 2024?
Nope, none whatsoever. Just be safe on New Year's Eve.
Dayne, any words for 2024?
If a sage like Ben isn't going to offer words, I'm going to shut my mouth too.
You know what? I've got one phrase. Call an Uber. Don't drink and drive, guys. Call an Uber. That's the show. Sherdog.com. Thank you all for tuning in. And 2025.